Hello friends, and a warm welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. This is a podcast about slowing down, simplifying your life, living seasonally and embracing an intentional life. I'm Amy, a 30-something mum of two, homemaker, home educator and allotment gardener. These episodes are my journal, sharing what's on my mind and sometimes sharing the things I need to hear myself as well. In these episodes, I delve into what it means to walk a different path in life, to step outside of societal norms and embrace all the beauty that it provides. From educating our children outside of the school system, living with less, and surrounding ourselves with a life of purpose instead of living a life by default. I welcome you into my world, a place where you can rest, relax, and slow down. Come on this journey with me as we open our hearts and minds to a different way of living. I hope you find what you're looking for within the words of these episodes and that they speak to you in your own unique way. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode on the Slow Living Collective. What did you guys think of the new intro, huh? I'm always trying to keep things jazzed up and fresh, and yeah, that intro, well, the previous intro, I guess, had been my intro for a very long time, and I thought it was time to have something a bit fresher. There's more of you guys listening to me than ever, and while I'm so grateful, so grateful, I sometimes get a little overwhelmed at that thought. But we're just going to breeze past that and we're going to jump into today's episode. Just know that if you're here and you're listening, I am so grateful for you. I kind of made this little intention with myself for 2023, and that was to put much more focus and much more effort into this podcast, because I put off making a podcast for the longest time. I often would think like, oh, should I start a podcast? And I was like, oh, no, nobody would listen to me. Nobody would care what I have to say. And it was funny because I found out by starting last year in 2022 that I love it. I absolutely adore this podcast. And it was never really about whether people listen to me. Of course, I want people to listen. That's what I make it for. But I also make it for myself, and that's wonderful. So, yeah, like I said, my intention is to put my heart and soul into this podcast a little more this year, because it's something I want to cultivate and nurture and grow. And that leads nicely into today's episode, actually, which was an unplanned segue there. But it does lead nicely into today's episode, because today I want to talk about the new year. Now, I know we're sort of heading towards the end of January, and you might think like I missed the boat there a little bit because New Year was a few weeks ago now. But it's still January. We're still in the first month of the year. So I feel like it's still relevant. And I want to talk about intentions. And like I said, I just made an intention, and now I'm going to do a whole episode about how I didn't make any intentions this year. So if we can just sidestep that part briefly. I want to talk about intentions, and I want to talk about New Year, and I want to talk about everything that surrounds New Year, like resolutions, intentions, goals, however you phrase it, however you think about the new year. I want to talk about why winter and the new year and creating resolutions just doesn't work in my world, and it never has. I think all of us can probably admit to the fact that we've grown up in this world that is full of like new year, new me. You know, it's the perfect time to start a new fitness regime, to lose weight, to be the person you've always wanted to be. Create those resolutions in January, and for most people don't see out a resolution for the whole of the year, and most people potentially don't even see a resolution out for the entire month of January. And I want to talk firstly about seasons. Now, you guys know that I'm very into seasonal living. As the time goes on, actually, I feel like I'm becoming more and more attuned to living with the seasons. And it's interesting because actually living seasonally, and when you talk about living seasonally, particularly like on social media, but also offline as well, like people will cock their head and be like, "What? What are you talking about living seasonally?" And it's strange because it seems to be such a strange notion to people, like living seasonally, what do you mean? And the irony of that is that's how we would have lived, right? In days gone past, that's how our ancestors would have lived. It's how actually not too many generations before us lived. And as time has changed and time has gone on, we have become pulled away from what has been the most natural way of living to us, and seasonal living being one of those things. Now, of course, we live in a modern society, but seasonal living is what is inherently built into us. It is natural to us. And I want to talk to you briefly about winter, because obviously winter is the season we're in right now, but also is the season that New Year falls in. And it's really important to just take a look at winter itself. So, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, obviously this is what I'm referring to, because New Year in the Southern Hemisphere does not happen in winter. But in the Northern Hemisphere, I guess the winter season, I would consider the winter season really November through to the end of February, and then we would move into spring. And these months, they are cold, they are darker. This time of year in January, it is bleak here in the UK a lot of the time. There are obviously those beautiful, crisp, blue skied, sunny days, and they are wonderful. They're one of the things I do love about winter. But the rest of the time can be, extremely cold, cloudy, bleak, raining. You name it. Sometimes snow, not often from where I'm from here in Hertfordshire, but yeah, it's a dismal time. And while there is so much beauty to be found in the season, it's a difficult one for many people, for most of us, I would think. And that does lead into the idea of setting intentions and resolutions this time of year. It is very natural in winter for our bodies to slow down. It is very natural for our bodies to seek rest. It is very natural for us to be more tired, to want to eat really nourishing, filling, warming foods. These are normal things for us, depending on the season. If you think about summer, you often want to eat refreshing foods, light foods, crisp salads, things that are really sort of refreshing on the palate. And that's just because of the heat of the summer. And, that's just very natural. If you think about the autumn, you very much want to, for me at least, I always think of autumn as a time where I retreat inside. And that's what I feel as late summer / early autumn moves into later autumn, like mid to late autumn. I usually think around October time that, the mornings are chilly. It's obviously less warm during the day. The nights are colder. The nights are drawing in as well as you head towards autumn equinox and, onwards to winter solstice. The nights are drawing in, you can feel the winter coming, and you have that sort of expectation of winter upon you. It is a time where you feel like you want to be inside more, you retreat inside. For me, I have this sort of like almost visible moment where, and I remember thinking it in autumn last year, that I definitely feel that coming inside. And I feel it in the sense of, there are mornings where I stop going outside to have my coffee, and so we would even sit outside and have a coffee, and the children would sit outside and read books with me, and we'd have blankets in the autumn. But there's a time where that stops and we retreat inside and we start to nourish our bodies with warmer foods for breakfast. And compared to the summer where I'm very much a fruit granola and yogurt kind of girl through the summer. And so it's different things for different seasons. And the importance of winter in what we're talking about today is that, like I said, it's very normal and natural for us to, in winter, just want to slow down. And it's natural across, actually, not just humans, animals are the same. Like, they go into hibernation. And if you think about it in that sort of sense, while we can't, head inside and hibernate for 3 months, I mean, chance would be a fine thing. Sometimes it's very cold at the moment while I'm recording this, but our bodies do hibernate to some extent, and like I said, that comes from the slowing down. But modern society doesn't allow for that. It doesn't allow for the ebbs and flows of the seasons. It doesn't account for the fact that our productivity might not be as high in the winter, because that is just naturally how our body and our systems work throughout this period of winter. Instead, we are expected to have the same level of productivity from January to December. It doesn't matter what the season is, your productivity is expected to be the same. And that is modern society. It is, patriarchal, it is capitalist, and it is consumer based. And we are, unfortunately, just cogs in that wheel. And when you try and step outside of that, and I know that's not entirely possible all the time, it's very easy to say, to step outside of these, inherent systems that exist in society. It's not that easy, right? We have to go to work, we have to earn money, we have to put a roof over our head and food on our table. It's not as simple as just being like, right, I'm not being a part of that anymore. But there are things that you can do to try and revert back to a different kind of time, a different kind of society, and you can, I guess, embrace the ebbs and flows of the seasons. You still have to be, unfortunately, part of modern society. It's not that easy to step outside of those things entirely, but you can still do things that don't necessarily connect with the modern world. Now, when it comes to winter, like I said, it's very normal for us to feel sluggish, to feel tired, to slow down, to want simplicity, to want to eat warm and nourishing foods, to go into a bit of a hibernation mode, and to just embrace a season of rest. And that's not to say that our time is going to be spent surrounded by candles and, just enjoying rest and taking care of ourselves. Life trucks on. It can be, easy, it can be hard. We're all going through different seasons in our lives at any one time. And so it's not to say that it is this idyllic image of what winter is. In fact, for so many people, winter is hard. It is hard to get through. There are some people that suffer from things like season affective disorder, very, very common here in the UK, and just extremely difficult for people who suffer from that to move through this season feeling anything other than just awful. So this episode isn't to say like winter is wonderful, let's embrace the rest, let's embrace the slowness, the slow down, let's embrace the simplicity of winter. It's not always possible. We're all going through different things, we're all in different seasons of life, and sometimes things are just tough, and it's not that easy to be able to appreciate anything around us sometimes. But when it comes to winter and the turn of the year and the beginning of a new year and this sort of push on goals and resolutions and intentions, I'm here to tell you that if you feel like it makes no logical sense to be setting resolutions or goals or intentions, however you phrase it, that you're right. It doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel the right time. There is nothing in, there's no relevance basically to having New Year when we have New Year. The Gregorian calendar says, hey, we finish the year on the 31st of December and we pick up the new year on the 1st of January. There is nothing aligned in the moon, in the sun, in the stars, the solar system, the seasons, or the earth. There is nothing that has any relevance to these two dates, the end of the year and the beginning of the new one. No relevance whatsoever. It is the middle of the deepest, darkest winter, and it makes no natural sense for anybody that follows seasonal living, and those who don't. It makes no logical sense in this period where we know our bodies naturally slow down, they naturally seek rest, they naturally seek nourishment. There is no logical sense that this would be a moment in time that you feel inspired to start a new resolution or goal, to start a new workout routine, or to start eating differently, or to start a project. If it doesn't feel natural, and I think for many of us, it really doesn't feel like the right time in the middle of the winter. In fact, I found some information online by a company called Sundried, and they conducted a survey of around 4,000 people, so just a sample of the population, and they found that 43% of people expect to give up their goal that they set at New Year after just 1 month. So by the time February rolls around, 43% of people expect to give up their goal. And it's interesting as well because they actually shared that 95% of New Year's resolutions are actually fitness related, but after 3 months, only 10% of people think their resolution will last. So it's really interesting, isn't it? I just think it's all connected to this period of time that, we have Christmas, and then we have New Year, and then we have nothing. We have January, and it's just a tough month anyway. I know certainly in the UK, I don't know whether they do it the same elsewhere, lots of people get paid early for Christmas, and while that feels wonderful at the time, it does make for a pretty elongated January, really, doesn't it? It was actually last year, this last pay period, let's say, for December, that for the first time since we've been married, my husband actually didn't get paid early and just got paid on time, and I loved it. Now, we're a one-income family. I am a homemaker. I stay home with the children, and I home educate them as well. So we are a one-income family, so we rely solely on my husband's income, and it just felt so much better to just be paid as normal in December and not have this period of time where usually it's like a week early, and like I said, it always feels so good at the time, doesn't it? But actually it makes January an incredibly long month. And so yeah, that was just going off track a little bit there, but it's interesting because it's one of those things that is really, really common, getting paid early for Christmas. And actually, what does it do? Does it make any difference? I don't know, because it just pushes everything just longer in January. So January is this sort of complicated time of year, where we come out of Christmas and out of, a season of frivolity, and we head straight into January, where for most of us there's not much going on. And it's cold outside, the weather is dull, and we don't maybe necessarily have tons to look forward to, and we're in the deep depths of winter. And whether we embrace seasonal living or not, our body knows that it's winter, and it's inherent in all of us, and these ways we used to live, while we don't live that way now, it doesn't mean that those things are gone. Like, our fight or flight response, as an example, is something that was, is deep in us, and it's incredibly important, of course. And as someone who suffers with anxiety, I will tell you my fight or flight response gets triggered at, some pretty essentially minor things. And it's really difficult because, I'm not faced with like a predator outside my cave, for example. And, I'm faced with something that is a lot more low profile, and it just triggers at random. Because these things are so deep and inherently bred into us. And so whether you live seasonally or not, these things are in us. Our bodies know that it is a time to slow down, it is a time of rest, it is a time of simplicity and nourishment, and it is not a time for starting new projects on the whole. So it was really interesting while I was researching this episode. I have my own personal thoughts, like I've shared in this episode so far, about the reasons why we might not necessarily see success if we set intentions for New Year around January time, because of the way our natural rhythms of our bodies, the natural rhythms of the seasons, it just doesn't align. We're probably more in an ebb than we are a flow. And I decided to do some research because like I said, I have my own personal thoughts about the reasons for this. But I wanted to see, like, okay, who decided that we're going to have New Year on the 1st of January? And I just found that, and I'm going to read it out to you. Until 1752, the Kingdom of Great Britain, except Scotland, and its empire at the time had retained the 25th of March as the official start of the year. Now, that has amazed me a little bit, because I've been saying for a really long time, January 1st, I'm not feeling it. When do I feel like my new year is? March, spring. And I want to share with you a little story. It's so minor, but it's really powerful to me. And it's something I experience every single year. And it wasn't until I was talking about it with my husband just a few weeks ago, heading towards the new year. And I was saying to him, like, New Year never really feels like the right time to set intentions. And I know I started this episode by saying, like, my goal for 2023 is to focus more on my podcast, and it is. But, I also know that that's something that I wanted to do anyway. Almost, it wouldn't have really mattered when I set that intention. It just feels right that, I say, for this year, because that's a time period. But for me, when winter ends and spring begins, that is when I feel ready to, like, tackle the world. I'm ready to take on new goals and new intentions, and I am ready to start things new. But aside from that, I feel like when I'm passionate about something, or when I really want to do something, it doesn't really matter at all. So, for example, last year I started my training as a yoga teacher, and it didn't have any significance. I didn't feel like I had to wait for a certain moment. It was something I'd wanted to do, and I got the opportunity to, so I did. And so it doesn't really matter when we start these things. And tying it to this inconsequential date in the calendar doesn't mean we're going to be any more successful with it or not. We find success because it's something we're passionate about, and it's something we want to do. We find it fulfilling, we find it inspiring. And so for me, like I was saying, the spring has always felt like a time where that probably aligns most. Every spring, I feel it. I feel it in my body and in my bones. I feel the new beginning. I don't feel that in January. I feel it in the spring. And I have always felt it. And it's funny because I've only really recently identified it and identified quite what that means in terms of new beginnings. Now, I've always referred to it, to myself and to my close friends and family, as the promise of spring. And where I live in a split level flat. I have a balcony. But this predates me living here. But I'm going to use this place as an example. I would maybe step outside on a spring day. It's probably sunny, the sky's blue, and I might step outside with my coffee. And I can feel, maybe for the first time properly, I can feel the warmth on my skin. And I can feel the fresh air in my lungs. I mean, the air will have been fresh for a while because, hello, winter. But I can feel the fresh air in my lungs. I can feel the warmth of the sun on my skin, properly for the first time. And I can feel the promise of spring. I can feel it in the air. I can breathe it in and I can feel it. It has the hope and the optimism of a new year. It has the hope for a good spring and summer. It has optimism for what's to come. That is the moment. Right there. That is the moment where you set your intentions. Because that is the new beginning. That is the promise of what is to come. And of course, it doesn't matter at all when you set a new goal, an intention, or a resolution. It really doesn't. When you feel inspired to start something new, it doesn't matter whether it's January, whether it's mid-April, October, or December 1st. It doesn't matter, because if it's something that you really truly want, you'll find a way to make it happen. And the time of the year doesn't matter. But if you're feeling like you feel like you should set goals and intentions at the beginning of the year, but it never feels right to you, this might be why. We were born to live by the seasons and to live by the wheel of the year. It's normal and natural to us, but slowly modern society has picked that away from us. And we are further than ever away from the people that we were destined to be. And so, but we still have all of these connections to that, but we don't know them. And it's taken people a lot to get back to that. And so if that feels like you, maybe take a look at living seasonally, and just, you don't have to jump full into it. You don't have to embrace the seasonal festivals or live by the wheel of the year, but just an understanding on who we are and how we were meant to live might help us understand a little bit more about the way we feel throughout the different seasons. Like, you can listen to me, of course. I will wax lyrical about seasonal living because it feels the most natural, and I really do recommend you just at least have a little read, because it might uncover some things and help you make sense of some things and the way you feel at different times of the year. Now, I'm not a big fan of setting New Year's resolutions, not even in March, funnily enough, when it feels like a natural beginning for things. But I know that I certainly feel more inspired. And when I feel more inspired, then I feel more likely to create something I love. And for me, that time does begin in March time. I do feel more inspired around that time of year. but I rarely do set an intention on a specific date. Like I said, when I'm inspired by something, I'll start it whenever. And I think, for me at least, that's a really great way to live. But also, for me as well, it is really important to know why I feel certain ways through certain seasons as well. And I know that for me, winter is a season of downtime, is a season of rest, is a season of recuperation, and for many of us, just survival. And if that's you, that's okay. Brighter days are coming, spring is on its way, and hopefully those dark days of winter will be gone for this year. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. I hope you leave today feeling encouraged to go out there and live your most authentic life. Don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can find me on Instagram at lifeonplot44, and you can follow along with the podcast and more at the Slow Living Collective. And I'll see you next time on the Slow Living Collective podcast.